Sawadee tukon, je m'appelle Axel and I'm a French woman living in Bangkok, Thailand. So today I'm posting a video that will be in two parts. The first part will be what I prefer in Bangkok compared to Paris, and the second part will be what I prefer in Paris compared to Bangkok. In all transparency, this second video might take a little while because I still haven't found 10 points I prefer to Bangkok. These points are incredibly random, they're not in order, and I just wrote them down as they came to mind. So there are probably other points that I could have mentioned in this video, but these are the first 10 points I wrote down. So let's go! So I think everyone who comes from Paris and sets foot in Thailand can feel the atmosphere change. It may be Buddhism, it may be something in the air, I don't know. But it is really easy to live in Thailand, much easier in my opinion than living in France. And this is something that you can know just by looking at people walking on the streets. So as a born and raised Parisian, I walk very fast. I'm always rushing, even when there is nowhere for me to rush. This is in my blood, this is how I've been raised. Rush, 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 things to do, go to work, go to university. I've never taken my time just walking down the street. Whereas something you can observe when you start coming here is just walk down the street and you will see these older Thai women, older Thai men that are just taking their time. And I think it has to do with the street vendors here. Everyone just looks around and stops and buys something and then continues their way. It's never just like I have to go from point A to point B and like this is all I do. I just walk until my point B, you know? And so you enjoy your time actually outside walking more. And something I've noticed myself, I spend significantly more time in transport here because the distances are bigger, yet I don't really stress out about that. So I feel like just in general the atmosphere, the people here are more chill and it reflects in the ease of life. For example, the ease of life, this will be a full point on itself. I found an apartment in under 2 weeks, and even installing my internet, it happened in under 3 days. So everything is much quicker, easier here. I feel like just they don't complicate what doesn't need to be complicated, whereas in France it is really always kind of a struggle. You always have to struggle. I feel like nothing ever comes easily. So for me there's this ease of life here where everything is just easier, especially for example I don't have to cook. I can just buy some cheap things from 7-Eleven or from down the street from the street vendor, and just things here are much easier, whereas in France there's much more effort to put into just living. Rent is so expensive, finding an apartment is so hard, everything is just harder I feel in France, whereas here it's much easier. I'm not saying there's no struggle, there definitely are, but in general it's much easier. So Bangkok cafes are absolutely incredible compared to Parisian cafes. So in Paris, every cafe has this old-timey vibe. They all look like each other and they all offer only coffee. And I don't like coffee, so I never go to the cafe. And if I go there, I have to order a hot chocolate or juice, which is more expensive than a coffee. But here, it's amazing because they have coffee for the coffee lovers, but also on the menu, there is a variety of other drinks. So for me, there's already that. The menu in itself, much better. But then the place, I've never been to a cafe who looks like another one I've been to. Never. Each of them have really their own aesthetic. Hell, last week I went to this cafe lost in the middle of like this random, it looks like the countryside. It's in Bangkok, but it's a gorgeous old building, super hipster looking, super well renovated, like beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Even in Paris this would be like a top building. This everyone would go there. And truly I've been to so many cafes like that. So here the cafes are more beautiful and they have often their own specialty drinks, and just the menu is much better. So for me, Bangkok cafes are incomparable. Like Parisian cafes suck. There are a few that are like themed or like a bit more original. It's very, very rare though. So for me, customer service is something I didn't really realize at first. I do think here in Thailand there is very much this idea of the customer is king, which I've talked about in, I think it was my Enchanté video, that it's not really the case in France. But it's only after a couple of months that I realized, wow, I never have to fight anymore. There is in France these aspects, I don't know if it's only in France or other European countries, but there is this patronization whenever you talk with anyone, any type of customer service. There is this aspect of fight, this underlying feeling of this is not gonna be a good interaction from the get-go. For me, it's something I didn't even notice at first, but then I realized, oh my god, like, first of all, the customer service here is better, but it can also lead to more abuse, right? Like, people think they can treat the service people like shit, and more likely than in France, they will never suffer any consequences. Whereas in France, the workers are a little more protected. But also, it also means that the customer service people don't talk to you like you're fucking shit. I never noticed how much people are patronizing in France. Like, truly, they talk to you like you're fucking dumb, like you're useless, and it's really, really insulting. And you don't realize it because everyone does it. So it becomes the culture. It's just like, yeah, I know better than you, so fuck you, you know? And it's not even something that I think people realize happens. And I didn't realize it happened until I came here. So obviously Bangkok is cheaper than Paris. It is cheaper, but it's not that cheap. And I feel like, especially when you're only a tourist, you can think like, oh my god, it's so much cheaper. But it's really not that much cheaper. I feel like it really depends on things. But anyways, in general, the cost of life is very much cheaper. So for me, my apartment here, I pay at least a quarter of what I would pay in Paris. Then for food, I think I pay also much less, and I go out much more often. And of course in Paris the cost would just rack up and rack up and rack up and rack up. So I feel it's a very much good city to live in because things are much cheaper. That being said, you have to keep in mind that I'm here on a gap year, I'm not working here, I'm not studying here. I think it would seem much more expensive for me if I were to work here because Thai wages are obviously not as big. So for me, I think there's also a difference, and I actually think that being poor in Thailand sucks more than being poor in France because there are less resources, and also I feel like social inequalities are much higher and much more taken advantage of. So for me, yes, this is a good point for middle class to higher class people. I don't think if you're lower class it really matters to you, especially if you work in Thailand directly. So I already talked a bit about it. I actually have a full video about it. It's so easy here. And for me, rent and the cost of renting in Paris is one of its worst points. It's truly one of the most annoying and tiring aspects of Paris because you know that whenever you need to get an apartment, you're gonna struggle. It's gonna become your sole focus in life for many months, if not a year, before you can find an apartment that suits your big budget and that is not literally just run down. So it's very costly, not only in money but also in time, in resources, and in your mind space. And for me, it was also one of the reasons why I still lived with my parents until 22, because as a full-time student I can legally only work part-time in France, and this is not enough for me to get my own apartment. So for me, it is really something that is one of the worst part about Paris, for sure. And in comparison, here it's much easier. This is a way bigger city than Paris. It has more space. New buildings are being built every day, whereas in Paris it's really not that much of a case because it's a really tiny city and it's also a historical city. Whereas in Bangkok, I feel like there's more space. The city keeps getting bigger and bigger, and there's so many inhabitants, and so the cost of living is cheaper, as I said, but that also extends to the apartments, and it's really just convenient and practical, you know. So for me, finding an apartment was really one of the best points about being here, and I know that whenever I go back to Paris and have to find an apartment for myself, let's just say I'm not looking forward to it. So here in Thailand, There is not just 7-Eleven, but 7-Eleven clearly dominates the market. There are Family Marts, Korean Marts, and there was another one, Lawson. Yeah, Lawson, I think. But these are not found nearly as much as 7-Eleven. I have just around my apartment 5 7-Elevens, and it's very much something that lacks in France. In France, there are laws that don't allow workers to work on Sundays, so workers can't work on Sundays afternoon, I'm pretty sure, and at night. Some of them, of course, there are exceptions for certain jobs like nurses, doctors, etc. But in general, for people who work in stores and superstores like this, they can't work at night. So every store in Paris is closed by 10 p.m., which is a good thing because, again, it means that workers don't have to do night shifts, especially since they are already underpaid and really often in not great financial positions. But also it means that if you want to get food in Paris after 10 p.m., you have no luck. If you want to get water, it's easier. If you have a place to stay, you just have to open up your sink. So you have to stock up on food and you have to be able to cook that food. But because again, there's no street vendors that will sell you something at midnight, right? And also 7-Eleven does so much more. I pay my internet bill at the 7-Eleven. I just flash a code and I pay in cash. I do so much things there, and you can also pay for your phone bill, do so many things there. So it's something that if I ever go back to live permanently in Paris, I'm gonna miss dearly, because for me 7-Eleven is just such a convenient store. I don't really do full grocery shoppings because I never cook here. Here I just mostly go do my grocery shopping in 7-Eleven. So for me 7-Eleven is something that is amazing, and I wish it would exist in France, and it's a really practical thing here that I will miss in Paris dearly. So a lot of Thai people don't understand me when I talk about the weather being so much better than in Paris, but let me explain. There are two aspects to this. First of all, there's the heat. For me, who has grown up mostly being cold, so for me the heat was very overwhelming at first. Now it's something I'm actually really used to. Of course, I still sweat and struggle under the heat, yet I'm used to it. So mentally it's not as draining as it was for the first month here. So first of all, there's that. In Paris it's cold, the skies are gray, it rains a lot, and it rains no matter the season. Here it rains during rainy season, so for 6 months, yes, it's raining all the time, which is annoying, but in Paris, it's raining all the time. Like, do I gotta say the Parisian rain is much better than the Bangkok rain? It lasts for much shorter and it's less fucking insane, because here there are sprinkles of water, but most often it's just insane, like torrents of water. The most I've seen rain here, I think it's 8 hours, so fucking insane. That would never happen in Paris, right? That being said, the second aspect, which is the most important for me, is the sunlight. The amount of sunlight you get in the day. The sun rises and sets at the same exact time every day. In Paris and in France in general, it's really not the case. In summer, it's amazing. The sun rises at 5 a.m. and it sets sometimes at 11 p.m. How amazing! You get this whole day of pure sunlight. But then during winter, the sun rises at 10. So when you get up, when you eat breakfast, shower, get ready, and go to work, it's all still night. And then the sun sets at 4 to 5 p.m. So when you get off of work, you also go out in the pure dark night. And this is the number one thing I hate about Paris, because I truly suffer from seasonal depression. It's a real thing. In summer, I want to go out. I'm in a better, cheerier mood. In winter, I never want to do anything. I never want to go out. And that's why, as someone who also has depressive tendencies, this is really bad for me. So for me, here, even though it rains, rainy season can be awful. It can flood easily here. It rains for 5 to 6 hours sometimes. At least the sunset and sunrise is consistent, and that's the biggest game changer. So for me, the weather will always be, I prefer to be sweating my ass off 100,000 times than to suffer seasonal depression again. So number 9 is the respect of the rules, and this is a bit more random. I feel like Thai people are kind of an in-between between Japan, where they're like super into rules, and France, where we love protests. Like our thing, our national things is protesting against things. But I feel like Thai people in terms of personality are kind of in between both countries. But on certain issues, and the most important, they're very respectful of the rules. So if you go, for example, in the BTS, there are lines, there are arrows that guide you. You have 2 arrows that goes out of the BTS and 2 arrows that goes in. I've never seen anyone not let someone go down before going in. Also, what people do in the BTS, they queue in front of the arrows. They queue by themselves. How fucking amazing. Parisians could never, French people could never, by ourselves without people telling us. Even if people told us, we wouldn't do it. So for me, that's something that's very, very appreciated. Secondly, just the respect of COVID. That can be a bit overzealous. So at first you had to wear your mask all the time, and now you don't have to wear it all the time, but still most people wear it everywhere. And that's good because I feel much more safe here than I did in Paris, where even when there was still a mask mandate, a lot of people didn't wear it, even in public transport. I feel like they think more about the community, which is a really good thing, because I feel like in France we've become overly individualistic, and it's really not a good thing. Editing Axel, I cannot believe I forgot one of the most important points. Food. So I know France is known for its food, and I do love French food from the restaurants. The food we eat day-to-day life in France is honestly so fucking bland and boring, and literally it's just pasta like almost every day, and gets very, very boring very fast. So even in France, when I started cooking for myself, I would cook a lot of Asian meals because I find that they have more flavor, more umami, and they just feel what I like in salty dishes better, because I'm a sweet tooth girly. So I will always say French pastries are the fucking best, and I miss them tremendously here. But in terms of salty, I do prefer the way that Asian cuisine is made, especially for veggies. So like a lot of people, I hate veggies. So in France and in most of Europe in general, we are interested in keeping the natural flavor of the food that we are cooking. So we are just gonna put a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, maybe pepper if we're feeling wow frisky. Whereas in Asian cuisine, they add a lot of flavor that will hide the vegetable taste way more. And yeah, in general, I do love spices. I love having a lot of flavor in my meals, and I find that Asian cuisine is better at that, especially since in France I would have to cook every day, and here I don't. And even Japanese restaurants in France, they're not very authentic. I feel like this is the first time I've like actually eaten Japanese in my life, even though I went to the Japanese restaurants in France so many times. So yeah, I just prefer the food here, and I eat a lot better, and I'm just really happy about that. And the last point, which is kind of random and maybe not something that people would expect of me, I love the lack of physical contact. So I know I'm French, we have famously la bise. Comment tu vas? And I don't like la bise. I don't like it. For me, even before COVID, it was really awkward to do it to certain people. Like, it's okay, it's not something that I hate. I'm not against physical contact. I'm not someone who's overly affectionate, which is weird. I always thought I was. I feel like I'm affectionate in my head, but not necessarily physically. And so for me, I really appreciate the fact that I almost never touch anyone here. The people I hug are my friends, and most of them are foreigners. And for me, doing la bise in France, or even just shaking hands all the time, was very, very annoying. And here I like it even more because it's so fucking hot. Why do you want to like hold someone's hand? No. And so yeah, I just prefer the lack of physical contact. Is something that I think is more practical and also just better in general during these times of pandemic. So yeah, that was my 10 things that I prefer in Bangkok compared to Paris. If I think of more points, I will either put them in the comments or do a whole other video on the topic. I will try to fill up my list of things that are better in Paris compared to Bangkok soon, so I can do the part 2 to this video. And I just hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time and have a great day.